Good morning, good day, wherever you are. Welcome to the next episode of Toilet Talk. And we've been sitting here trying to figure out what to talk about, and we've been lax. We had a crazy weekend. Well, we've had some crazy
weeks.
Yeah, crazy weeks, plural. And more to come. But we wanted to talk today how to title this. Basically, it's when somebody enters your life or assumes the position in your life as your authority. Someone who shows up, ta-da, I'm your guru, I have arrived. And it's usually more subtle than that. It's usually not met with even the title of guru. And it can happen in person or it can happen on social media. I've experienced both. When people have made the assumption that they are above me, especially spiritually, and they insert themselves into my life. Like, I'm here to save you. I'm here to rescue you. I'm here to make you all better.
I'm here to encourage you. It's like,
right.
Oh, you've done such a good
subtle.
job.
Oh, yes. So, it happened to me this week on Facebook, and someone I didn't know, not even a friend, probably a friend of a friend, because I did show up in their newsfeed. Somebody showed up and they said the first time, "You're doing a great job. Keep going." And I thought, well, that was kind of weird to just make that comment out of the blue, and everything sort of rose up in me. My ego wanted to assert itself and say, "You don't know me. You don't know what I've done. You don't know my credentials, my accolades." And I felt that, that's a reaction, right? It came from
defensive much.
Defensive in that moment, yes, indeed. And then my shadow, which has a different voice, shows up with, let's see. I kind of like that. I kind of like that thing of somebody trying to come above me, because then I can have this reaction.
I'm going to actually disagree with her here for a moment, because her shadow, if that's a different voice, it's not a different voice. It's like that's the same voice. It's like my shadow. It's like my normal voice is this, but my shadow, when it comes out, is more like this.
Oh, I will have you. You're talking about the auditory voice. Oh gosh, not what the voice said. I don't know that I can do the growly thing as well, but
your shadow obviously isn't as well developed.
I'm going to react to that. I have a very pronounced shadow. I want everyone to know. It is interesting to me. So
is your shadow prolapsed?
I swear. Can't take this man anywhere. And it's not like we're in public, okay? Because I'm sitting on a toilet. This is as private as things get outside of a shower. But sheesh. Okay.
Sorry, I couldn't resist. It was just right there. You were talking about your shadow being pronounced, and it was just like,
pronounced or prolapsed shadow. Yeah. Well, you'll just have to let that be a mystery. So one of the things that I've sort of come to see, we have all these internal parts, right? The inner child, the ego, the shadow, the many voices of parts frozen in time, etc. I tend to think of my ego as that part that wants to be way up here on the pedestal and going, I want the shiny things, I want the fun things, I want the pretty things, the exciting things. The ego demands the positivity. And here comes the shadow, making sure we keep balanced by bringing in the dark side, the negativity, which doesn't mean bad or evil. It means these things need to be in play, in balance. So these are my two main inner voices. So the ego hates being triggered. The shadow gets off on it. They have a very different agenda. So when this experience happened, and it was just this one comment, and I don't remember what I said in response to it, because this was a stranger. I dismissed it. Well, this stranger continued showing up on posts and saying all kinds of things that were showing that she had this need to put herself spiritually above me. And she started with all of her self-praise, her accolades, the work that she's done. I posted a meme about 9 indicators that you've been doing shadow work, and they were encouraging. They were good markers for those of us who have done shadow work, for those of us who want to do shadow work. Things that we would want, like being less reactionary, recognizing that other people have the same issues you do, so feeling a sense of connection.
Do you want to look up the list up?
It'd take me too long to find it. It'd take me too long. It's I post prolifically. It's a few days down in the pile. But her comment was, oh, I've done all these. It took 5 years of hard work, and now I've arrived. And when it comes to shadow work, when you start doing shadow work that has an impact, and people call different things shadow work, but shadow work is basically uncovering something about yourself to which you were previously blind. So it's something you don't want to see, something that you cringe. There's usually an element of shame or fear, or at least resistance to it. And when we take that out of the darkness and actually look at it, it's not initially comfortable. It's awkward. It can be painful. And the more you do that, the more you realize, oh my God, there's this vast reservoir of shadow work to be done, because the subconscious, unconscious, is 95% of who we are, and out of which we manifest. The 5% is like the tip of the iceberg. And we can do a lot of work up here and imagine that we've done the work down here, but we don't arrive. It's a way of life. We just continue to do it. It becomes more and more natural to do, almost reflexive as we get into it. You just start doing the work.
Well, it's not just reflexive, it's reflectively reflective.
Reflectively reflexive. Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Or reflexively. Now I'm showing my exhaustion.
Reflexively reflecting the repression of the reservoir. Anyway, we love wordplay. We can get off on that. So I responded to her. This was like several comments into various posts where she's inserting herself as this authority figure, for which I was not advertising. I'm not guru shopping, and she was gurulizing her way into my life without consent, and that's it's fine for a conversation. It's not okay when it becomes predominant, when it becomes a pattern. So I said, I wonder what it is for which you are compensating so hard. Because this continuous insertion, what I was recognizing is that it was compensating for a sense of insecurity, or perhaps a misguided feeling of inferiority, because no one is really superior or inferior. We just imagine ourselves to be above or below. And when we keep making ourselves be above other people, it's to compensate for feeling like we're actually beneath other people. And both are conflations, both are inaccurate. And thus she began lashing back, telling me she had read through my posts, and I was clearly abusive to people who were corresponding with me.
So wait a minute. So she went from praising you for doing great work to berating you for being critical and cruel.
She took my comment personally. Mm-hmm. This question of wondering for what was she compensating so hard. And that wouldn't be something I would say out of the gate. This would be something that I said because of a pattern that was happening here. So I called her out on what was happening. And if she was, as she was describing, this relationship expert, this someone who's proficient at shadow work, who had arrived, then and there's no arriving, but if it was true that she had done significant shadow work, then she would have taken that question, I wonder, for what you were compensating, and taken a pause and go, oh, maybe after an initial sting, say, am I compensating here? Because as you do shadow work, you start to naturally begin to question yourself and your motives and what you're doing, even though there's almost always the initial sting. I don't know that we get to where we don't take anything ever personally. I'm not there. I'm not there. Maybe others are. I don't know if that's possible. And then she went from this praising me, but like wooing me into seeking her out as a type of guru, a type of teacher. And then when I gave her a comment she didn't like, she went for the jugular. She made it very personal. Told me it's clear I've never done any shadow work. It's obvious that I'm abusive to others. And she went on, making personal statements about me, telling me that I go around setting people up to disapprove of me so that I can start to shoot them down. And I sat with that. I sat with all of that for a moment. Robin and I were then on the phone, and I asked him, do I do this? Do you see this that she's just claimed about me in me? And you will say what you mentioned. You talked about conflict that we'd had in our past, which we refer to. See our relationship videos for more of that. So what was your response to
Well, so Dean and I have had, well, sorry for all the movement in the camera. Wow, man, I am not holding steady this morning. My apologies. Either too much caffeine or not enough. Is there never not enough? Anyway, sorry, back to segue about legal drugs. Dean and I, over the last 8.5, almost 9 years now, 8 3/4 years, have had a lot of experience dealing with triggers, triggering each other, having to examine our own triggers, working with our own shadows, working with the effects of what it really means to deep dive into every little reaction we have, because they all start out little and we don't even notice them until they get big, and then we're like, oh my god, where did this come from? So Dean and I had a lot of issues earlier on in our relationship with triggering one another, and then taking taking the triggers personally. So we would say something to one another, the other person would get triggered. We would blame the other person for triggering us because, of course, it was the other person's fault, not our own stuff that was getting in the way. And so we'd go from reaction to personalizing it and lashing back, and that would be a pattern. We would literally have really, really, really unhealthy dynamics while we were working out what we were triggered by, what we were triggered from, what the inner cause of it was, why we would lash back, how each other were actually either consciously or subconsciously trying to trigger one another, because we've done that too. And that's basically, what I told Dean. I said, yeah, there have been times when we have both been triggered and then lashed out as a form of offensive defense. We would feel defensive and therefore feel like we would need to lash out to protect ourselves. Thank you. Yeah. And so, yeah, she's done that. I've done that. Nobody that I'm aware of has ever not done that. Everybody I've known, right. Even some of my the people that I respect the most, that I would consider my own personal guides. I've seen everybody do this.
They're human.
That we are human. So, of course, I said, yeah, that's part of what we've done.
Right. And that was helpful. And just now, as he was describing the patterns that he and I have had in the past, it occurred to me that part of our reaction to each other, part of what fueled the enormity of it at the time, was this internal belief, a compensational belief, that we had done our work, that we had, in a sense, arrived at a certain place. So, of course, it's not me having this reaction problem. It must be you, because I know I've done my work. And we're both coming at each other with that sense of, wait a minute, you don't know who you're talking to here. And that this person was doing the same thing. She was compensating for whatever, I don't know what it was, but something within her that felt insecure, vulnerable, personalized what I had said and came back with a lashback of, wait a minute. She called me a narcissist. She spelled it wrong. There, doesn't matter. And a few other things. And it was, on one hand, I knew she was projecting, but see, if I go automatically, if you say something to me and I don't like it, and it feels like it doesn't fit me, because it consciously doesn't fit how I see myself, if I go automatically to, you're just projecting, then I'm not being open to what I might need to see that's reflecting my subconscious, my shadow. So I turned this into a post. I did not reveal who they were. I didn't even reveal their gender initially because it didn't really pertain. And actually, many people assumed that this was a man doing this. And I had a couple of female friends say, this is what men do, sort of the mansplaining thing. And to which I don't care for that whole thing because it's a way of putting men down. But there have been some men, when a woman asserts herself, there are some men who feel threatened by that, and so she is knocked down to size. Things that a man can get away with, and he can be called assertive. We are called aggressive, or a bitch, or a ball breaker, or whatever, just because we said something with a sense of adamance. So all of that was in play, but I asked people who knew, people who had interacted with me, many of them for years and years, do you see me doing this? Is there something here I need to see? And people came back with shock. No, I don't see you this way. I have not interacted with you. A couple of long-term friends said they have admired the way in which I have dealt with people who've come at me. Because I like to give people the benefit of the doubt. And I also want, even if in the moment I'm cringing from something someone says, I want to know the truth about myself. I want to face what I'm blind to in myself, generally speaking, even though in the moment I might cringe and feel that internal reaction to what somebody just said to me, that sting. You're looking like you want to say something.
Well, I mean, there's always components that I could add in, but I want you to have the ability to continue on, unless you want me to interject at the moment. So that's up to you.
Well, I have a thought I wanted to go to here. Okay. We were discussing earlier. It's sort of the principle of, if you spot it, you got it. And if I'll personalize it. If I see something in you that irks me, and I'm saying you generally to anybody watching, if you and I were sitting here.
No, she's talking directly to me. She is. Don't be mistaken. No, she's targeting me.
Oh yeah, this whole thing is a setup. I've been wanting to say this to him for such a long time.
Ooh, we should have one of these days on Toilet Talk. All the things that we've wanted to say. That would be hard. I love you. I miss you. Oh, not those things. Other things. Not those things. Sorry. Anyway, go ahead.
If I am talking to you or interacting with you, or you just, if there's something about you that I feel irked about, irritated about, something that makes me go, I feel judgy toward you for that trait, that thing about you, it behooves me to turn it around and say, what is it about you I don't like about me? Because we project what we don't see about ourselves onto others. But also, if there's something about you I envy, you exhibit a quality, a characteristic, even a physical attribute that I feel, why don't I have that? I envy that. In reality, I have it too. That's the golden shadow, the dark shadow, the golden shadow. Pretty much, if we don't have it, we can't see it, to whatever degree. And it may not be exactly exhibited the same way. If I look at, I don't know, some former president, and there's something about that person that I go, I have that attribute. somewhere in me, and I don't want to see it. It doesn't have to be the same measure, the same degree, the same way of displaying it, but I can't see it unless I've already got it. So that's a useful thing to carry around. It not necessarily easy, especially when something really sets us off. We might want to deny that we have that quality or that characteristic or that aspect. I want you
to chime in.
I want you to chime in. I'm feeling your chime.
I'm not like feeling a natural jump off point on what I was considering talking about with regards to this. Of course, I'm feeling a little bit off this morning. I did not sleep well last night, so my brain is just a little bit foggy still. Anyway,
it's the company you keep.
Well, so there are lots of things about this topic which set me a little bit on edge, actually. And this is my own. This is the opportunity for me to take a look at some of that. I tend to go towards more of an extreme humility when it comes to inner wisdom and knowledge and my own abilities. So it's like, that's not that big of a deal. I'm not that wise, whatever, And I struggle with the ideas of assuming that I know something that others don't. And we're sitting here talking about this subject and what this other person has done on one of Dina's threads, and one of the things that I'd mentioned to Dina right offhand was that there might have been an opportunity at the time to approach this lady differently in the moment, and that was to ask and engage with what her intent in what she said being encouraging. What did she say? It is toilet talk. Gas happens.
Oh crap!
Or that. Anyway, God, where was I going with that? Shoot, see. She had said something along the lines of like, "Oh, good job, keep going." And while on one hand that can seem kind of condescending, it could also be a bid for somebody really trying to encourage another person and not being a person which is well versed in communicating clearly what their intent or what their meaning is. And so Dean and I talked a little bit about that at the time.
And I decided that would be a really good thing to do. And I often do that. I often say, I don't quite understand where you're coming from. Could you explain? Could you give me more clarity? Or here's what I think you're saying. Here's how I'm taking it. Is this accurate? Which is extending the benefit of the doubt. By the time I commented, I kind of about had it with this insertion of this "I'm above you, I'm here to help you" thing that she was doing. And what troubled me about her lashing back is that she flipped it quickly from "I'm here to be your benefactor" to "all right, you ungrateful reject, I'm going to now let you have it." And that tsunami of projection.
It was passive aggressive.
Yes, and it was outright aggressive.
It started out passive, but
the
then
original part was passive aggressive. Then it was just the veil was off, and everything she was accusing me of, she was actually demonstrating in the way in which she did it.
Right, and so I mean, I guess that actually brings us back to where I wanted to go with things, and that is, or at least from my end, we when we're doing spiritual growth, there are any number of different books and resources out there that can help guide us in what we need to do for ourselves, and oftentimes the ones that I am attracted to the most make a point of really focusing on personal accountability. The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz and the Fifth Agreement by his son Don Miguel Ruiz Jr. Are really, really good examples of this. They focus on the idea that you are responsible for yourself and only yourself. The first agreement is take nothing personally, and including don't take anything that anybody else does personally because it's about them, but also don't necessarily take anything personally about what you're doing to yourself, because there is a portion of yourself which is unknown to you, which will act on your behalf, but not consciously on your behalf. And so when we do shadow work, what we're doing is we're looking for those inner voices and those inner pieces that are acting on our behalf that we can't recognize. That's the whole idea of it, is they're operating in the shadow. They're operating out of the realm of our conscious awareness. And so when we make a decision to examine our lives and take nothing personally, what we're saying is, I'm going to explore this because I'm having emotional reactions to it. And that means that there's something down there that's worthwhile looking at.
Right.
And so, as we go through, these, as we go through interacting with these other people and people who think that they're here to be our savior or our guru, nobody can do our work for us but ourselves. Nobody can tell us what we need except ourselves. We can gain information, we can gain insight, we can gain knowledge, we can gain wisdom from others by watching them do their work, or by watching them, or by having them advise us. But ultimately, it's still up to us to decide what we need to do, how it needs to happen, and what our shadow is actually trying to tell us. And one of the things that I've noticed about many of the people that will show up and try and guide us without our permission and our consent is that they're ignoring the idea that the person who's trying to do the work, the person they're talking to, is the only one that has the answers. I know I'm losing my train of thought.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Because I'll pick up the next train, next car here in the train. As Robin was talking, things were being stirred up in me, and I thought about the sting that I had, that somebody was imposing themselves upon me as my authority without my consent, without my asking for it, without my advertising for a guru. And we come by our reactions honestly, and I spent most of my life with a great number of people asserting themselves above me, assuming that because I was a small child, so my parents, that I needed to be not just guided, but controlled. So there was this domination over me as a child. That's how they were parented. That's what they knew. And then when I entered Christianity, there were so many people who believed they had the right, the authority, and God's mandate to assert themselves over me. And when I was in my first marriage that lasted for 25 years, again, there was this implication that as a man, as a husband, there was a certain amount of authority over me, and that I was innately underneath that authority. And then I had a spontaneous situation where I woke up to who I am. And this is a process. It wasn't like I'm now awake. I entered that door, and the awakening is a way of life. It's continuing. There's no arriving. So my reaction to that was a natural one of, no, you may not put yourself above me. When Robin and I went through shamanic training some years ago, at one point during the training in the direction of the north, for those who are familiar with the medicine wheel. It's a time of stripping away all of our false senses of identity, all of the I ams. I am a human, I am a woman, I am a mother, I am an artist, I am a leader, I am a whatever. All the things roles that I play, but they're taken on as identities. We strip those away to find the self, capital S self, underneath the foundation of who we each are and who we are collectively. And then in the next direction, we take those back on, but as roles. So in this process, we were told by our spiritual director that we were to burn all of our former spiritual authorities and leaders in effigy, including him. That we were to step into the position of becoming our own soul authority, our own self-referencing authority. And in doing so, this doesn't put us above anyone else. It's only about the person. And in doing so, the paradox of this is that while we are subject to none, we can learn from all. We have no teacher, but all of the universe, everyone and everything in it, is able to teach us. So we want to remain receptive to that. So that's part of shadow work, is to be able to take everyone who does anything, even if they're projecting, even if they're wrong, even if they're projecting their own stuff on us, taking that and saying, all right, I just got called a bitch. In what way can I see that I'm a bitch? What part of me that's bitchy needs to be owned? And how is that a gift? And how can I use it? So for me, my inner bitch, she gets shit done. She stands up for herself. She will say, no, you may not assert yourself over me. She's useful, but it's not my personage. It's not everything about me. It's a part, a role that I can take on. When I'm with Robin, I'm not taking on the role of mother. I'm not taking on the role of teacher, but there are ways in which I can be mothering or teacherly, and he does the same for me. It's a flowing, it's a reciprocity, a give and take. It's not a position. So that notion of each of us being our own authority, I believe, is extremely important for us to step into that for each of ourselves. But also to remain teachable, as Robin was saying, to be humble, to not toot our own horn that we've arrived, because when we do that, we can know for sure that we are compensating for something in our shadow we don't want to look at, some place that feels the opposite of what we're asserting, what we're claiming, what we're demanding about ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually going to run back to the 4 agreements here. Well, actually, the 5 agreements, because I think the 5th agreement, be skeptical, is just as important as as important as the original 4. And I'm drawing a blank because I always draw a blank on the 3rd agreement. The first one is be impeccable with your word. The second one is take nothing personally. The third one is
sheesh.
I can't remember at the moment. The 4th one is do your best. And the 5th one is be skeptical. So Dina's going to look up the 4 agreements here, and so she can remind me of number 3.
The 4 agreements.
But one of the things that really strikes me about them is that they're not...
Yeah. That was loud.
Yeah, you can't do voice searches while we're doing this.
I'm sorry.
One of the things about the 5 agreements is that there's 5 agreements that we take on as personal work. Now, this is the important part, is it's personal work. So there are 5 of them. But in reality, there are 10 different ways to utilize them. Because there's a my side, there's the side which I look at internally, and then there's the side that I utilize. I utilize the filter of the agreement to examine what other people are doing. So if I need to not take anything personally, or if I need to be impeccable with my word, that means, let's take being impeccable with my word. If I need to be impeccable with my word, what that means is that I'm going to go to great lengths and great pains to examine everything that I say or everything I want to say. before I say it so that I can ensure that what I'm saying is clean. In other words, there's no guilt, no remorse, no shame, no blame, no anger. I'm going to take all the steps I need to ensure that it's clean, that it's clear. So I'm going to use words that somebody else can understand or reword what I'm going to say so that they can understand it. That means being aware of not only my own ability to have a vocabulary that some others might not understand, but also being aware of what they have the ability to understand, paying attention to their responses to what I'm saying, and ensuring that if I see something that comes back at me, that I rephrase, if they aren't understanding, that I rephrase it. Being clean, being clear, and being compassionate, meaning that I'm not going out and using what I have to say to harm another. That's being impeccable with your word,
not
and I'm sure not weaponizing it, right? And so I can take that on as my personal work, and I take that very seriously. I try to. When I see other people not doing it, that only comes through my ability to examine what I've done so that I can understand what other people might be doing. And then I can engage with them on the level of, is this what your intent is? Is this what you want to say? Is this how you want to come across? Are you intending to be cruel? Are you intending to be belittling? Are you intending to use a specific word, which maybe you don't know that it means something other than what you think it is? So being impeccable with my word also means that I have the ability then to look at what's coming in at me and help to translate that into something which might or might not allow me to engage with somebody who maybe doesn't know how to do that. So you were going to interject with the third.
Yeah, I found the core agreements image, and the third one, ironically enough, is don't make assumptions.
Don't make assumptions. Yeah, that's it. Don't make assumptions. So that has a lot to talk about. They all work together really, really, really well. And we can use, gosh, I am so scattered on all this stuff. Anyway, I'm going to let you take over for a minute.
So the assumptions thing is interesting, and it's getting to the point that we sometimes repeat some concepts in doing these talks, because this is unrehearsed, unscripted. We're just winging it. And the part about assumptions, what really helps me is to recognize that, first of all, as a human being, I'm always making assumptions. That's one of the things my conscious mind does. It's important. I mean, it wants us to survive. All of these things that the brain does, that the parts do, that the shadow does, are ultimately for our good. They're all doing the fourth agreement. They're doing their best. They're wanting to help us. There's no bad parts, including the ego, including the shadow. So when
they're only bad behaviors.
Yes. The trick is to catch the assumption. So when I'm believing my own thoughts about a person, about myself, about a situation, if I can catch myself and go, I have the assumption that this person is out to assert herself over me. What else is possible? And it's that question, that what else is possible, and letting it hang there, not letting the same mind that formed the assumption come up with the answer to that, but letting life itself show you. Just living in the question itself rather than seeking an answer can be useful for loosening the grip that assumption does, instead of, this is true because I'm having the thought and I'm believing it. Instead, calling it what it is. I have the assumption that this is happening. What else is possible? Let it hang there. Let life itself show you what is possible. And then I could do what Robin was suggesting. I could say to this person, any person, I have the assumption that you're trying to show that you're above me here in this. Is it true? Ask directly.
And even, and there are so many nuances to language. We could go into things like E prime and and nonviolent communication and things. And there are lots of different ways to phrase questions like that, which, depending on the person, depending on your own reactions, you can. It's a great exercise to take a situation like that and sit down and think through how many different ways could I actually respond to this?
Mm-hmm.
How many different phrases could I use? I have the assumption that you're trying to do X, Y, and Z. I am feeling attacked. Did you intend to? Did you intend to belittle me by using these words, or any number of different things? And all of these work together so well.
Yeah.
The fifth agreement: be skeptical. It's not just be skeptical of what other people are saying. It's being skeptical of what you tell yourself.
Yeah.
Just like
mostly that.
Well, it's mostly that. Again, the five agreements are not about what we project out onto others. They really are guidelines for what we do to take personal responsibility. And so, being impeccable with our word, back to the first agreement, is don't tell yourself that you're a bitch. Don't tell yourself that you're an asshole. Don't tell yourself that you're awful, that you're bad, that you're. Don't use those words for yourself, because what you're doing is you're treating yourself the way that you wouldn't want anybody else to treat you.
Yeah.
With those words, and they're damaging. So, that's the kind of thing that the agreements do, and there are always two sides to them. They can act as a personal magnifying glass, examining ourselves, and a filter to look at the rest of the world through. Once we learn what we need to learn in ourselves, we can look at the world through those filters that we develop.
And this is all about taking personal accountability, recognizing that your triggers are your own. It's an invitation for healing, because just about everything that happens that's unsettling, that's an upset, is a set up to be able to do your own work. If you feel something strongly, you're triggered. It's an invitation to do the work that only you can do with yourself. So everything and everyone can become your mirror, including your own self-talk. As Robin was saying, most of us talk to ourselves in ways that if someone else spoke to us that way, they would not be our friend for very long. So befriending ourselves and catching ourselves saying things to ourselves that are unkind or cruel, quite often they're echoes of things others have said to us, and we've internalized them. It's like we got passed the baton of abuse and neglect, and we take it upon ourselves to keep doing that. And we get to question that. We get to ask, is this true? And even, when was the first time I felt this? And see what comes up. Work with someone else. Work with someone who's qualified to help you do the internal work, someone who can facilitate a session, whether it's internal family systems or hypnosis or shamanic journeying, something that can be with you and help you to get past your own defenses that don't want you to get to the stuff that still hurts. And when the stuff still hurts and we don't take those invitations, those triggers to do that work, it's going to come out sideways. It's going to lash out in weird ways, such as happened on this. We're all being triggered all the time, always. And we have to really, we don't personalize them, but we take personal responsibility and accountability for our own triggers, rather than, you said that, you made me feel that way. No, they said or did something that's similar to something that was once said or done to you. And the problem is not what happened to you, it's the conclusions we form about ourselves. Oh, I must be bad. Oh, I'm not deserving of love. Oh, I'm a weak person. Whatever it is that we concluded way back when, those become the blueprint,
the underpinnings for our shadow.
Yeah. And the shadow wants those things to be integrated and healed. So when we get the trigger, the ego is saying, oh, no, that's not me. No, that's you. Projection, you're projecting. The shadow says, hold on. Let's look at that. Because there's something valuable in accepting whatever's going on under the trigger.
As a means of an example, when we're triggered in society, most times, what people will do is they'll suppress the emotional response. They'll push it off and relegate it to the recesses of their mind, because in the moment it's either too uncomfortable, they're too busy, or they just don't want to deal with whatever emotional trigger is coming up. That suppression leads to the development of that shadow area, and it will continue to run in the background, creating havoc in our subconscious and playing with our other pieces and parts, and eventually it'll come back out and come back out sideways, like Dina was talking about. So imagine this in the context of Facebook. Somebody comes on, says something you don't like, and you react. There are a lot of people out there, their first response is, oh, screw that, block, right there, done. That is literally the same thing we do to the triggers that come up in our day-to-day world that we suppress. We say, screw that, I'm not going to deal with this. I'm going to block them. I'm going to get them the hell out of here, because this is not pleasant. This is not something I have the time or the bandwidth or the energy or the emotional security to deal with. So you block this person, they go off into the background of Facebook, you never have to see them again. But just because you blocked them doesn't mean that them and 10 of the other people that you've blocked, because they've turned you too, aren't sitting out there in a group talking about you. They're still out there. They're still out there having the same opinions. They're still out there talking about what happened. You just can't see it because you've decided to suppress it. Now, in the land of Facebook, coming back again to it, the ideal is if somebody triggers you, you may have a discussion. You try and figure out, well, was this really something that was worthwhile getting triggered over? Did they intend this? Can we get past it? Can we make a connection? Did I misunderstand? Yeah. And all of a sudden, you may still end up blocking them after 5 minutes or 3 days or a year and a half worth of interaction. You decide, you know what, this person just isn't healthy for me, and I'm going to remove that from my life. That's a healthy boundary to establish. And there's a difference between establishing a boundary and reacting in a way to suppress something. One is acting out of health. The other one is reacting out of emotional triggers.
Right. I like that a lot. He comes up with some really great analogies. I like real life examples that I can look at and relate to. And thank you, that was useful. The repression of what wants to be expressed. If we could start saying, I'm triggered, yay, opportunity for healing. If we could do that more often, even if in hindsight, even if after the fact, and that was an opportunity for healing, and I didn't take it. And then don't condemn yourself. We're all learning things, and this is counter to everything we're taught in our culture about how to deal with stuff that's uncomfortable. The cancel culture right now of, I don't agree with you, therefore you are wrong, therefore you are gone. That reaction, it blocks any possibility for healing between you and the person, between you and yourself.
And it also blocks any opportunity for solutions which might lead to healing. Yeah.
Right. So being open to all of this, and I'm talking to me too, because
we all do it.
Yes, and I.
Believe it or not, Dina and I are not the poster child for perfection of spiritual work.
No, I don't even want it. No, that's a responsibility I do not want to have at all. I want to be free to be me in the messy middle of a process of becoming more and more me, shedding more and more of what's not me, the conditioning that I've taken on, the external and internal compensations and projections and fears and shame and everything else that gets in the way of me being the best version of me. And again, there's no arriving. It's all about the process and the progress and the ever more becoming more authentically who we are, so we can do what we came here to do. And healing is a big part of it. We get set up to be messed up in the beginning, and then we take responsibility when we can, as we can, and it can take what it takes to get there. And sometimes it takes a lot of pain before we say, "Wait a minute." I mean, what is that? I think Elizabeth Gilbert said it, or she at least quoted it. Is that all awakening and growth begins with an aversion to our own bullshit, where we finally say, I don't want to do this to myself anymore.
Yeah, Dina brought up a point that I was actually going to play off of a little bit as well, and that is this idea that our culture and our society doesn't set us up, doesn't teach us how to do the emotional work, doesn't teach us to be emotionally aware, doesn't teach us to be intellectually engaged. We get a lot of mixed messages from our society, which get in the way of actually doing this work. Um, our schools, tell us that they want to educate us, and yet try and put us into these, pigeonhole us into this specific type of system, which works for so very few. We get messages all the time in our culture about men being either not emotionally engaged at all or too emotional, women being too emotional. Um, Dina can expound to great degrees about how the Christian church has discouraged both emotional and intellectual development. I mean, just all over the place. They just don't. They don't want people to think about
automatons, obedient little automatons, which works for the people who are in charge of the corporation, the church, the institution, the whatever, Facebook.
Right.
People who are in charge want those below them to be in order, to be controlled.
So if we're dealing with emotionally charged material, and we're asking people to think about what's going on, not only are we not encouraging that kind of development in our society, but there are so many different things that have led into making even those two concepts more complicated, with the introduction of chemicals and heavy metals and all sorts of things which have really compromised the the baseline for which people have the ability, the physical ability to to work with both their thought and their emotion. I mean, lead poisoning has. We were talking about, we were listening to NPR and listening to a presentation that talked about how much damage lead has done to the culture and to the intellect of populations for the last
I think it was
150 years. Talking about that.
So what he brought up was just this is one element, okay, out of many.
Yeah.
When lead was introduced to gasoline, so now it's in our atmosphere. We breathe it. It goes into the ground. We consume it through the food.
Well, we don't have lead in our gasoline anymore, but yes, it was introduced, and for those generations,
it was there. And what the lead does when it's that prolific is it lowers IQ and it raises the impetus for violence.
Mm-hmm.
So
emotional stability goes out the window.
Right. And
that's what Mad Hatter's disease is, by the way, in case you're wondering.
Oh yeah, exactly. Too much consumption of lead one way or another. It's what brought down the Roman Empire, because they were drinking and eating out of lead utensils and goblets, and it wonder what's going to bring down this empire. But there does seem to be a lessening of IQ points, collectively speaking, and a heightening of extremism and violence, and those do not bode well. They do not.
I'm thinking that at some point we ought to do a series on the 5 agreements. But anyway, that's kind of an aside. I mean,
that would be great. I would want to reread the book. Once upon a time,
we could take it one chapter at a time. We could take it one point at a time.
Yeah, we could do that. That would probably be the best thing, rather than trying to cram them all into one segment.
Very long.
These things tend to be going long. Speaking of going long, I think this one is probably reaching its saturation point.
Yes. I was at my saturation point before we started, so you're lucky to get this much. To be quite honest.
We just needed to put another one out there. We've not had the time in the past couple of weeks. So thanks again for listening to another toilet talk, and maybe we've given you some food for thought. Although I don't know that toilet and food should be in the same vicinity.
Well, I mean, toilet talk where shit gets real. So
Yes.
Food is real too. We
Yes.
could. Anyway, we do hope that there's something in this particular video that is helpful for you guys. For myself, I apologize for being just quite so.
We are very human today. We
Yep.
had a slow start, and we've got
Yep.
a busy day ahead, so we need to get to it. But stay tuned, because we will probably think of other things that are interesting, at least to us, to foist upon the rest of you. And if this meant something to you and you learned something, you got something out of it, post it in the comments. If you enjoy these, you can like and subscribe and share, all those things. So we will be back.
Have a good day. Bye.